Hello everybody, we have another game with the white pieces. We go 1e4 against Carrion, 1260. We play the bishop's opening. We bring out our bishop. He brings out his knight towards the center, attacking the light squares. We bring our corresponding knight out, defending the light squares. He brings out his bishop, controlling the center. We go d3, closing the pawn chain and preparing our bishop. Let me close my window. Lawnmower right outside. Jesus Christ. Way to ruin my video, guys. Okay, so he goes d6, opening up his bishop. I'm gonna go f4 and mute my mic as this guy comes back around. I'm just gonna take the bishop back. Take the pawn back with the bishop and develop a piece. And now he castles. So I'm gonna continue my development. He goes h6, trying to control g5. The drawback is it wastes a little time. He's not developing pieces. Wasn't exactly jumping to g5 just yet, but okay. So now we can castle. Maybe we can move our queen. No, we can't castle. But maybe we can prepare castling. Maybe we can move our queen. But because he's played passively, we also have this opportunity of d4. He hasn't stopped us from playing d4. So we could do that. It does weaken this pawn, so you have to consider. But let's see. Let's, for the time being, lift up our queen and say, hey, we're going to castle long. What are you going to do about it? Right? Also, maybe we're going to take this, right? Takes, takes, takes. Maybe we're going to do that. Maybe we're not. I don't know. Let's see. Okay, now I'm going to castle long because the game's more fun when you castle opposite sides. That is a fact. And again, I can push this now that I'm safe. Well, not perfectly safe, but more safe. I still have to do an eventual king b1, but not at the moment. I'm better developed than him, kinda. I think my center's a little better, so I like white a little more here. He goes bishop g4, developing his last minor piece, pressuring the knight and pinning it. However, I plan on pawn storming him anyway, since it's opposite side castling. So this encourages me to go h3. Okay, so he trades probably so he can get this square, the dark squares for his knight, since my knight no longer controls them, since it's in the graveyard. So he goes a6. What does this threaten? It threatens to expand with tempo, and then again, and then just pawn storm my king. Okay, that's fine. We know he wants to do that. The drawback is it's very slow, and the g file is open. So a rook here would be absolutely devastating. His bishop does currently control that, but I might sack an exchange. I'm thinking if I go here and he takes and I take, okay, I gave him an exchange, but I'm threatening this. And if he moves his king, what if I take? My queen is still there, but I need another piece. So you know what? Instead of giving up the full exchange for unclear reasons, let's try to do it without giving up the exchange. Let's just lift the rook and go here. The downside of this approach is it does give him time. It gives him time to conduct his pawn storm with Tempe. But if I take this and he gets a bishop and I get a pawn and he takes, I go check, he has to go over, check, let's say he blocks. I don't have what I need. Okay, so let's not sack right just yet. And let's drop the bishop back one. Well, actually, let's do the forcing move. It's a pin. It threatens the hanging knight. And if he takes it, that knight was defending his king. So I'm kind of happy to get rid of it and get my knight out of a tempo, right? Because it was going to come with tempo. And into the attacking posture. So I think this transformation is kind of fine for me. Also, not that I'm thinking about it right now. I mean, I'm obviously thinking about it, but d4, if he moves the knight or the bishop at some point, but I'm really looking at his king side right now. He goes a5. What does this threaten? To continue the pawn storm, but what's the drawback? It's way too slow considering I have an open g file. If there was a pawn here, like on the g file, that would be much better for him because I would have to waste time trying to open it. But you throw the pawn off the board and you have an advantage. Where is it? Boom. We follow our plan, rook over. Now there's no knight here, so it introduces new ideas potentially. Black goes b4. What does this threaten? Just continuing the pawn storm. Downside, extremely slow, not taking into account my threat. So I'm gonna threaten this, and now because he's that one little slip up, his king is basically doomed. And there's no way to, let's say, bring a queen here and defend. So you can't sack the queen. If you try to defend maybe with the bishop, that's an idea. So maybe we have to see what we have there. Let's say he brings the bishop back and we take. He kind of has to take. And then if we move our queen in, we're threatening checkmating one. If he moves his king, that doesn't help. If he moves his rook, that doesn't help. If he moves the f pawn, that doesn't help. If he moves his knight, that doesn't help. If he moves his queen, he has to sack it on f6. Otherwise, it's checkmate in one, no matter what, I think. Or g5. He's got to sack his queen on some square, basically. So that's cool that this works. Also, even if he could defend it, let's say queen here, you would be able to add another attacker since it's pinned. And like I said, the open G file was just, if you have opposite sides castling, and I've said this in other videos, there are many situations where you want to throw your pawn off the board. I literally have like the tiniest piece of property. How many times do you need to go over the same spot, right? I don't think the grass is resisting the cuts. Shouldn't be that difficult. Okay. So anyway, this guy's realizing he lost, so hopefully he resigns so we can move on. Maybe I should just write, no, I'm not going to write anything. I was going to click the little thing that says GG, but apparently that doesn't show up until after the game, so. Basically, if you have the opposite side castling, You want the open files, so you usually just pawn storm. And as you get to like 1200, 1300, you start learning, oh, you pawn storm opposite side. And then you get to like 15, 1600, and you learn how important it is to be fast. And so you start your pawn storm earlier. And then at like 18, 1900, you realize that you want it to be so fast and that it's so sharp that you start pushing the pawn storms while those pawns are hanging. And so they become sacrifices, right? Lower rating than that, they always try to defend first. They always play h3 and then g4. They never just play g4 and let it hang, right? They always prepare the pawn storm. And then the higher rated you go, you realize the situations where you don't prepare it, you just hang the pawn storm. Okay. We got the win. We got the guys stopping. No more noise. And now we got Norin, rated 1356. Now we're approaching 1400 rated enemies. Again, they're all afraid of the caro-kann, which is hilarious. And so they deny it, and they just go into the standard classical Pirc variation because they don't want to deal with the caro-kann. I don't know the theory in the caro-kann, so they would probably be perfectly fine. Bishop e3. This develops a minor piece towards the center. Indicates he might want to castle queenside. So we do our preparatory c6 for a future b5 if he goes that way. Also, it takes away central squares from his knight. He moves his queen, creates this battery, maybe trying to trade my fianchetto bishop, prepares castling. Fine. I'm going to go b5, showing him that I have intentions of pushing if he castles. Queenside. If he castles queenside. So he doesn't. Now maybe this scared him away. That's why it's a funny move. So he develops his last minor piece towards the center and says, hey, I'll castle the other way. Don't worry about that. That's also fair. We want to finish our development, so we can castle. Maybe we can bring a knight out. Maybe we can go b4 anyway. And after he moves his knight somewhere, a5. Let's give that a shot. You could probably develop, I mean. I'm curious to see. Okay, he goes here. We're just going to go with a5. It gives us another avenue for development for our light square bishop if we want to kind of guarantee the trade. So he goes a3. This threatens to break down our nice pawn structure. I would say the drawback is it spends time, but I spent so much time on my pawn moves that it's fine for him. He's much better developed than I am. And if he takes, and I take, the rook hangs, so we're looking at that. Also the pawn hangs, so we're looking at that. So let's just take the pawn. In this way we don't lose material. It does develop the rook, but with no pawn here, maybe I can use the b4 square at some point. Although this pawn, I might give up at some point because I don't want to deal with it really. We'll see. I'm going to continue developing probably. So let me put my last minor piece out. Maybe you could have gone other ways, but this knight's kind of defended funny, so maybe I'll snap it off the board. Mess up his pawn structure. He can't castle queenside anymore. If he castles kingside here, I'll snap it. And I feel like worst case scenario, I'd lose my a pawn, but so what? Like if he castles and then he's got 3 guys, I probably won't want to waste time defending it. So he moves the knight out of the attack, puts some pressure on my stuff. Downside is Maybe I'll just take this. I'm gonna take this, and if he takes back with the bishop, he loses control of the center. I'll kick the knight, take the pawn. If he takes with the queen, I mean, I'm still gonna kick the knight, but then the queen's not pressuring my a pawn. So, and if he takes with the king, maybe he should take with the king. I don't even know. But anyway, he takes with the queen. So now one less guy attacking my a pawn. I'm fine with that. If I take, maybe he'll go back somewhere. I'm just going to develop a piece first. Can't go wrong with developing. He castles. That's fair. I mean, I think now's the time. Now's the time. Let's castle. We have a very dragony Sicilian position. Only with the pawn on c6 instead of c5, let's say. I don't know. Maybe play on the b file. He doesn't have a knight that can come to, here anymore, so maybe I can play c5 at some point. Okay, so he moves his queen. I guess he's trying to develop it closer to my king. The drawback of this move is, well, now maybe it encourages me to play c5. Well, why? Because if he takes or pushes, he'll relinquish control over the e5 square, which will hit the queen and the bishop. I guess in response, this. Yeah, I think c5 works here. Other moves you might have had were, let's say, developing the rook with tempo, because your queen is defending your a pawn. So he moves his queen. He's threatening checkmate in one, except for the fact that my knight's here. So he's not threatening anything unless he kicks it with e5, let's say. But he can't do that at the moment. So you could kick the knight, but then you're walking into other types of attacks. So instead I'm going to do a good looking forcing move and try to lure the bishop away from this diagonal. And like I said before, now I have two good squares for my knight. I think I like this one. Well, yeah, might as well. Threatens the bishop, it closes off his diagonal, gets a little closer to this side. I'm going to get my queen in the game, and then I'm going to get my rooks in the game. He goes f4. This threatens my knight, and maybe threaten to prepare e5. Drawback is, I guess it's a pawn move. Every pawn move weakens your position a little bit, but it comes with tempo. I have to respond. I say let's just take his bishop off the board. He of course recaptures. Now there's a fully open c file. I have a weak a pawn. He has a weak b pawn. Fine. He's still going for the checkmate attack. So I'm going to go with a forcing move to get his knight out of this, so I don't have to deal with it. And now there's no like bishop bearing down on this or anything. So he moves his knight back, so that's fine. But now there's no immediate attack on my king, let's say. And I'm going to bring my knight here to remove it from the tempo attack, to offer the trade of bishops, which would have led to checkmate for him before, but now he doesn't have that construction. It also coordinates on the dark squares, so again my knight can try to hop into these squares with good effect. He pushes the f pawn that threatens to loosen up my king a little. Drawback is it weakens the dark squares. So I could jump my knight in to, let's say, which one? Maybe this one makes sense. And material's even. Position's pretty even. Whoever makes a mistake is probably gonna lose, like a big mistake, a blunder. So you're gonna have games that are fairly even up until move 70 sometimes, and just gotta hold on, and they'll make a mistake eventually, right? He takes my pawn. This threatens just to open up my king side a little, weaken my pawn structure. Maybe you could take with the knight, but I don't really care. I'm gonna take with the pawn to keep the pawn cover for my king. He can mess up my pawn structure, but I'm gonna bring his king out a little bit. Also, I have this check I'm noticing. Maybe that does something at some point. Okay, so he goes d4. What does this threaten? My knight. What's the drawback? I mean, it's a pawn move. Maybe he's opening his rook as well. Maybe he just wants to dislodge my central knight. But this kind of, I could go here. I could take his knight. I'm thinking though, if I go here, like, it does hit the pawn. And if he goes here, yeah, you know what? Let's go for this one. I was gonna take his knight and then trade a rook, but that's just like simplification, and then no advantage. So at least this move, I can try to go for an advantage because it's a double attack. The only way to defend is this, which is passive, or this, which is gonna walk into stuff probably. And I also need to get my queen here. My king's kind of loose though. I gotta be careful. I also need this rook in the game. That would be awesome. My rook and my queen, if they were in the game, that would be very helpful. Because he has all of his pieces kind of doing stuff, and I don't. But my knight is more annoying than his knight, so... So I think that's giving me, giving him practical headaches. But we'll see. He's got 5 minutes. He's got time to think. I'm the one who's running out 3 minutes. Okay, so he doesn't defend the pawn. He attacks the knight. That's the threat. Drawback. Well, if I take this, can he trap me? He's probably trying to trap me, but I could always just bring a rook over. Or a queen over. Although queen would pin myself, so... So maybe not the queen. Also, maybe I can go back here, hit the rook. That takes a while, but if he lets me, I'll just be up a pawn with an outside passer. Okay, so he doesn't do any of that. He pushes a pawn in the center so that if I take, he can get his knight super active maybe. But that doesn't make sense. Because if I take and he takes with the knight, I take this with check. So if I take this and he takes with the pawn, I go here at check. Either way, I'm going to open up my queen, so let's do that. And then I want to trade everything ASAP. There's no way he's going to let me trade this rook though. But if he catches up to me on time, he's going to start blundering everything, so. He kind of has to take, right? And then check. And then king over. And then what? And then... That's not the move. I thought you couldn't do that. Oh, he can go queen here. So takes, check here. If I take this first and he goes here. Let's take this. And then if he blocks here, I'll take this. And I could swing in my other rook or with a queen check. Okay, so he goes away, but doesn't this hang the knight? As well as checkmate? What? So confusing. Okay, so he just hangs checkmate in one. I don't mind that. I'll take it. Some free points. Relieves the